Thank you so much, Candid. And let me, with great excitement, introduce you to tonight's amazing panelists. So our first panelist that will be joining us today is Laurie Kirk, who is a security researcher at Microsoft. She specializes in cross-platform malware analysis with a focus on mobile threats. She also runs a YouTube channel at Laurie Wired, go like and subscribe, that covers all sorts of in-depth malware analysis, reverse engineering, exploitation, and security topics. Laurie received her bachelor's degree in computer science from Florida State University and is an active member of the security community. She has spoken at multiple conferences, including DEF CON, Objective by the Sea, Troopers 23, Colonel Con, Blue Hat, and B-Side Seattle. Our second incredible panelist is Etienne. She's a Haitian American, resilient woman at heart who, after being raised in Haiti, relocated to the US following the devastating earthquake in her homeland. Completing her high school education in a different country, she faced several challenges, both of cultural shock and separation from her parents, navigating a world vastly different from the first 14 years of her life. She embarked on the journey of higher education, even without a clear roadmap, but through her unwavering persistence, passion, and tenacity, she discovered her true passions and graduated with a BS from Florida Atlantic University. Her determination paid off later when she entered the corporate world as a cybersecurity analyst, and within almost 3 years, advanced to become a cloud solution architect at Microsoft. I'm so excited to have these two incredible women join me today, and I'm going to kick things off by asking just a general question to both of the panelists. I guess, Laura, you can answer first, and then Anne, I'd love to hear your answer as well. But the first general question that I have for you, diving right in, is how do we define the very thin line between protecting our security in both like national terms and also just on a case-by-case individual basis, and violating the privacy and security that all humans on the internet are entitled to? So Laurie, I'd love to hear you answer that question.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a very difficult question as well. To me, there's just, sorry, I'm getting a little bit of feedback, I think. I'm not sure if the audience is muted. To me, there is kind of this evolving.
Oh, Laurie, I think you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So to me, going back to the question, there's this really evolving line that I think is going to change over time as society kind of changes and progresses, as well as the threats to society change and progress and get more and more serious over time. So to kind of start with an anecdote, 20 years ago, like when I was growing up and when I was a little kid, my parents would always tell me, never share information online, never share your real name, never share your age, never share any kind of personally identifiable information. And society has grown very strongly over the last couple decades, where most people are very comfortable with sharing this kind of information on their social media, on websites, on games, even just all over the place. And I think the line in trying to protect individuals as well as protect national security is going to evolve alongside and at the same time as society is willing to share a little bit more information online. And this kind of opens up the right to be able to think that this comes from the individual. Every single individual person is able to have their voice shared and heard and be able to try to educate other people as well as educate people in positions of political power to what they are comfortable and willing to share. And I think this is how that line is going to evolve over time, where people take the accountability to be aware of cyber threats and to be aware of how they want to be protected and let those in positions of power know how they want to be protected.
All right, thank you so much. Anne, I'd love to hear your answer to that question as well.
Thank you, Sandra. And to build on Laurie's comment, it is a really difficult question, really. And when I hear that question, my thoughts are 100% transparency, as well as a continued conversation. So we need to understand what does it entail that when national security is doing what it needs to do to protect us, and when is the line drawn, and now we're in the territory of private information. So that's what I mean as far as transparency. And from a continued conversation perspective, I would say people speak up. If there's something that is not right, use your voice. And if you feel like you're not being heard, then this is where we bring in community. So I think where the thin line is when we don't know exactly where does national security stop, when they say that they're trying to protect us, and when do they step into the territory that, hey, this is my private information, I know that you're trying to protect me, but I'm not comfortable knowing that you have access to this. So if we know that this is not going to happen, these are the rules, this is our goal, this is where the transparency comes in. And community perspective, if we feel like these rules or the line does not really make sense to us, then we're going to speak up. We're going to reach out to people who share the same ideas and perspectives as us. And we're going to try to do something about it so that we can keep that line clear for, you know, different age gaps, different generations, because different people have different understandings of things. So community will bring that understanding as well, so that we can keep people accountable and we can keep that transparency as well.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for both of those really illuminating answers. Laurie, I'd like to jump back to you. You mentioned that over the years, there's been a trend where like people are sharing more and more personal information online. Obviously, that also comes with a lot of threats. So as people's online behavior has changed with the years, what are some trends you've noticed in the corresponding threats to their privacy online, and also just in cyber threats and their targets in general?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think probably the most fascinating and severe issue that I've been seeing really progress over time is the fact that it's easier to profile people beforehand for targeted attacks. Now, I'm going to bring up something related to like the cryptocurrency space. This is a common scam that's just, it's full of so many scams over time. What I've been seeing is a lot of malicious actors will look at people's social media. They'll see, oh, maybe they work for this specific company, they're involved in this specific thing. They seem like a really good candidate to target for a particular kind of attack. Now, circling back to the cryptocurrency example that I was talking about, they'll see when people are working for cryptocurrency companies and think, this is a person that I would like to try to attack and drain all of the financial data that they have inside of their cryptocurrency wallets. And this kind of attack has really only become possible because people are sharing so much information online, because people are so willing to trust other random people who might say, hey, let's have a quick meeting on this, and I'd like to pitch something to you. And then they end up downloading malicious applications that listen on the back of their device and try to drain their financial information because of this. But they gave all of that information willingly online, which opens up a huge attack vector.
Do you think there's a reason like this happens more specifically in the cryptocurrency space versus the traditional financial markets?
I mean, it happens in both, but in general, the cryptocurrency space, there's a lot of scams, and then there's B, a lot of not super professional behavior. So people really want to be part of the get rich quick schemes. So they're more willing to listen to kind of shady people online and, yeah, interact with them.
So they're really exploiting more of this human side of this rather than like exploiting any like specific hacks or vulnerabilities in systems. They're exploiting the vulnerabilities of human beings.
Oh, yeah, exactly. In fact, a lot of attacks happen because of social engineering. Even if you're downloading a malicious application, usually you have to give that app permission to execute. You have to actually execute it yourself. So the real social aspect of this becomes super important.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. And obviously both of you both work at Microsoft, but I'd like to ask you specifically as an architect at Microsoft, what are the cybersecurity like frameworks and concerns and just the general stance that you take on cybersecurity in your everyday life at Microsoft?
Absolutely. That's a really good question. So the frameworks, definitely, we do like to let people know that we do practice. There are those principles that Microsoft follows as far as like making the customer aware that we do respect your data. We know that we're going to be working with you so that you're able to use this product and strengthen your cloud posture and everything. But their first question is like, okay, well, all of this data is going to be ingested, and this is my company's data. Well, what are you going to do with that data? Are you going to try to use it to make your products better? So the first thing I like to start off with, I like to show them settings, permissions, controls, limitations, so that they can feel like they can understand that they have control over how far things can go as far as like data being shared. And also I do go over the kind of data that is being shared with them, and how are we able to implement our products to make your cloud posture safer. So we're not gonna take the data of your company to do that. We're just gathering intel. We're gathering information about threat actors out there, and based on that, research is being made, and then we create those products to address them. But I do let them know that Microsoft will respect your privacy, and then once that is established, I feel like we can move forward.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you a follow-up question to that. Microsoft is obviously like one of the largest tech industries like in its sector and in its field. And many may even some smaller tech companies even complain about it having a monopoly. So obviously Microsoft, regardless of whether it's a monopoly or not, has a lot of power and a lot of influence over the sector. What unique benefits and downsides of having like such large omnipresent tech companies would you say that what kind of benefits and downsides does that have for cybersecurity when we have companies this large?
Well, with great power comes great responsibility. So I would say, yeah, that's great, flattered, but also that can be a downside, because when all eyes are on you, we're going to be looked at to be held at the highest standard. We have to catch up with whatever that's going on out there in the wild. We have to be informed, as well as the people that represent Microsoft, the people that work there. There is that expectation as well. So yeah, that's great, but that can be a little bit of that can give a little bit of anxiety, because like I know I show up and I show up on the behalf of Microsoft as well. So I know I have to bring my A game.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would say that's the downside. And then something positive about that is it's huge, but we collaborate a lot and with many different companies. And I'm able to, as a matter of fact, weekly, almost daily, I meet people working in different companies, helping them strengthen their cloud posture. And I love the fact that I'm able to connect with different companies and help them through Microsoft. So I think the collaboration is great, because like it's Microsoft, whether it's cloud, whether it's, operating system, everybody is using it. So I love knowing that there is that connection. I feel like that I'm always involved. I can relate. And when it comes to tech, I feel like I can always participate in the conversation, especially because of the training that we're provided to be able to join those conversations as well.
Yeah. Oh, all right. Thank you so much. And then Laurie, I'll go back to you. And then I also kind of just want to pose the same question to you. Obviously, at Microsoft, you have a lot of power, you have a lot of responsibility, as Anne said. How have you seen cybersecurity really impact the everyday lives of those that you work with? And how do you make sure that like in your like work and in your career that like you're really making sure like privacy and cybersecurity are being prioritized?
Oh yeah. Well, there's a couple ways that we do that. The amazing thing about it is that because there's so much information out there and because there's such a large amount of people that use a lot of the devices, a lot of the software that Microsoft has, we have a lot of insight into common trends and common threats that might affect people. And this is such an important career field to be in because if you work on like Microsoft Defender, like I work in, for example, you write a detection that is potentially protecting hundreds of thousands of people all over the world from a specific threat. And we have to make sure that we're trying to find these threats proactively as quickly as possible to impact the highest number of people possible, which takes a lot of exploring through data to be able to find these potential threats. But at the same time, you don't want to use data like in an incorrect way. So the important thing that we do a lot inside of Microsoft is anonymize data. There are ways to be able to explore a ton of relevant data that is relevant to a threat that you might be wanting to track, that you might be wanting to protect against. But at the same time, you don't need to know the specific data related to each individual customer. So it becomes this fine balance of trying to find out what is the relevant data versus what is the sensitive data that we don't need to have access to.
All right. And just to follow up to that, I know that there's probably some things that you can't talk about that are work related, but you mentioned that like you find and you stop a lot of threats. Is there one that really stands out to you? Maybe one that was really unique or that impacted a lot of people? And maybe can you tell us a little bit about that and what you did to stop it?
Oh yeah, there's so many impactful ones. I think probably the biggest impact to the biggest threat to people these days is ransomware. I'm not sure how many people have seen all of the ransomware threats that have happened on the news, and it's just growing and growing and growing over the last few years. Now, I work primarily on platforms other than Windows, like Linux, Android, iOS, so I'm going to talk about the Linux perspective of this. But I see plenty of threats that are going through and trying to encrypt all of the data on the system, and they're trying to impact as many machines as possible. They'll try and target servers that host other machines. So they're infecting, let's say, 30 machines by just getting into one initial attack vector. So they're maximizing this. And this is common among a ton of different groups of ransomware that they make the biggest impact possible. So I think that's probably the most interesting thing to try and protect against is ransomware families that are targeting multiple different machines and spreading across multiple different things. Probably a few specific families. Nobody may have heard of them, but like Hive, Rebel, stuff like that. Those are always really fascinating, impactful threats.
Yeah, thank you so much. And then Anne, I'll go back to you, and I guess I want to switch tacks a little bit. So we have a lot of people in the audience that are really interested in getting into cybersecurity. I, for one, am also really interested in the field of cybersecurity. You come from a really unique background. Uh, my question for you is, how did your background and your experiences growing up as like with very unique experiences, especially going through college, and adjusting to that, how do those influence like your journey to who you are today and like how you approach the field of cybersecurity?
Absolutely. The field is very intimidating in my opinion. And even when I was getting into that field, but that was back in 2018. It was even more intimidating because a lot of people did not understand what the cybersecurity entail. And there are so many pieces of it, like are you information insurance, are you doing audits, and then there's the security engineering aspect as well. So people would get really confused as far as they would think that they need to know how to code to get into cybersecurity. Absolutely not. You just need to understand how do threats work, how there's just certain basic things that you need to understand, and then you try to gain some experience from there. So for me, my experience was to do some research. Obviously, I know it sounds cliche, but I really needed to understand, what do I really want to get into when I said I want to be in cybersecurity? Do I want to be an information system security officer? So do I want to do audits? Do I want to be a security engineer? Do I want to be a security researcher? Am I into architecture? Am I into cloud? Do I want to work on premise? So I would say definitely do that research, reach out to people, ask question. It's always going to be better when you're talking to someone versus reading like a bunch of articles or website trying to figure out on your own. And then find out where you flow naturally based on all of your research. I'm curious and I like to build things and I like to ask questions and I love helping people. And that's how I ended up as a cloud solution architect. But I knew before I could get here, I needed to know a lot about the field and I needed to understand so that I could relate to people when I'm trying to help them. So I decided that I would want to start as a cybersecurity analyst. And honestly, I did not even know that when I started as a cybersecurity analyst that I would be doing audits. I honestly thought I was going to be coding as well, but I didn't do any of that. As a matter of fact, I learned KQL so I could do some threat hunting. I was working with sysadmins so that they could kind of like show me their world so that I can understand the difficulties that they face when they're trying to meet the requirements that cybersecurity is requesting to be compliant versus still using tools that will allow other people to collaborate or using the best tools, the most recent ones and with all of the updates. So I had to collaborate with a lot of people within my premise so that I could learn their work and then so that I could have like that empathy when I'm trying to help people as well as an architect. So I did a lot of research. I dared to ask questions. And if somebody did not have time for me, that's okay. Nobody's going to die, but at least I tried. But guess what? If they gave me that time, I learned a lot. And I really believed in myself. This is something that I really wanted to do. So I just went after it. I know it's really tough to get to that point, but nobody's going to be your biggest cheerleader. So you're definitely going to have to start right there. Believe you can do it, take action, reach out to people, and then kind of see how things go.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for that. And then I guess I want to kind of ask Laurie, I kind of want to ask you a question in a similar vein, which is just like, for like the young people listening, the people who are interested in cybersecurity, maybe like, for example, I'm about to go off to college. What kind of things should we really be taking advantage of? What kind of opportunities should we really be looking out to? What kind of people should we reach out to like maybe even like get to the point where you are?
Oh yeah, first of all, I would like to say, like, if anybody happens to be in this audience, you're already ahead of the curve because most people don't even realize that cybersecurity is a thing. Like me, for example, growing up, I used to be a software engineer, and then when I was younger, I didn't really know anything about programming, and I got into software engineering. And then afterwards, I ended up getting into cybersecurity, kind of by happenstance. But then I realized, oh wow, there's this whole world of things out there. There's reverse engineering, there's threat analysis, there's so many different things out there possible. Basically, kind of to build on what Anne said, do the research, figure out what fields are of interest to you, and then once you find something that seems potentially interesting, dive into that field and get as much information as possible. I'm going to focus on like the reverse engineering aspect because that's my specialty. Basically, there's a lot of books that are really helpful for trying to get some background knowledge. One is like Practical Malware Analysis, not just good for reverse engineers, also for all aspects of cybersecurity because it tells you what are the overall kinds of threats out there. So you get this whole architectural idea of what are the possibilities. And then as you increase those skills, make sure to put them on your resume. Like people downplay too much how much a resume can help prove that you know what you're talking about. Put the specific tools that you're proficient in, put any specific information that you're able to say, like I analyzed this threat, especially if you can write a little bit of a blog about it. And that will hopefully help you get an initial interview at a company. Make sure to do a ton of research into any kind of security related positions. I see a lot of the positions are titled security researcher, and that confuses a lot of people. My title is technically security researcher. So look for a lot of positions at different companies related to that, and hopefully you can get your foot in the door doing all of that.
All right, that is awesome. Thank you so much, both of you, for this amazing advice. I think I'm now turning it over to Audrey to ask the question, to moderate the audience Q&A, see what questions the participants of the audience have to ask, and get you to drop some more nuggets of wisdom. So Audrey, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Sandra.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much.
Hey everyone, I'm Audrey and I'm be hosting the Q&A. I did want to congratulate you, Sandra, on such a great moderation. I loved your questions, and Anne and Laurie, your answers were also beautiful. It was just a good conversation to watch unfold. But without further ado, I just want to move us into the Q&A. So if there's anyone who has any thoughts, ideas, or reactions that they want to share, you're totally welcome to drop them in the chat, public or private. And if we're not seeing too much of that, I do have some of my own questions prepared that I worked on with the youth advisory board at our last meeting, actually. So, okay, great. So one of our questions is, how do you think your career field will adapt to constantly evolving cybersecurity threats? So this is kind of open to either of you. It's more of a general question.
You broke up a little bit as you were saying the question. Can you repeat it, please?
Yeah, of course. How do you think your career fields will adapt to constantly evolving cybersecurity threats?
As an architect, how will my career field adapt? I do think that we're gonna focus wherever the new technology is, and right now it's Gen AI. So what we're gonna do is we're going to think about ways to be proactive, and we're gonna help companies. We know, for example, there are tools that are great using Gen AI, for example, Copilot for security, but we know that it's a great tool. However, there will be people who will be leveraging this tool to do, horrible things to other people in their companies and take advantage of that as well. So how would this impact me as a cloud architect? So now I'm going to be working on ways with Microsoft, implementing those ways with different companies that we collaborate with, so that we can find ways to protect ourselves from the threats that are out there as we're leveraging any sort of new technology that is out there. So I'm looking for shapeshift. We're still doing the same work, but we're gonna apply it to whatever is trending at the moment.
I like that.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're okay. I was just gonna ask Laurie if you had anything to add about that question.
Yeah, I wanted to build on what Anne said that was really interesting talking about AI. One thing that I've seen really progress a lot lately is the fact that for like phishing and scams, people can use AI for good things, but also nefarious reasons as well. Let's say you're trying to create a convincing scam to convince somebody to click on a malicious link or download a malicious file. At this point, they now also have the ability to use AI to help them craft something that's really convincing to potential victims. So I think we're going to see a really large growth in this kind of area and a growth in social engineering, which is a very surprisingly large aspect of cybersecurity and a really large attack vector. Aside from that, I just see the field of cybersecurity increasing a lot because the threats are getting a lot more prevalent, the threats are becoming a lot more impactful. For example, in the last couple of years, there's been, gosh, I think millions and millions, if not billions of dollars lost to ransomware attacks. This just happens so much, and every year we're seeing progressive growth in this area. So I think security researchers are going to have to become more prevalent. There's going to have to be a lot more of us, a lot more people involved in cybersecurity. And then we're also going to have to work on educating every single person in the world even more to potential risks that they might actually face.
That's great. Thank you so much. And Laurie, I'm really glad that you mentioned how people might leverage AI to craft more nefarious emails, because in the chat has actually asked if there's any advice on how to explain phishing emails to someone who doesn't believe they're being scammed.
Oh, I got to think about that one. How to explain a phishing email to somebody who doesn't think they're being scammed. It's Two things. First of all, I think always be skeptical of every email that you get, especially if it's from an external source. Second, you can use good cybersecurity practices even if you're not aware if you're being phished at all. For example, if an email includes links inside of it, like don't click the links. If it's linking to an external source, try to go use any search engine to search that website because they often create phishing websites that look exactly like the legitimate websites, but in actuality, they're scams that are going to like steal your data or potentially try to convince you to download something malicious. So do your own search. Check open source intelligence places before you click any links. You can also check any files that you download, like in VirusTotal, in so many different open source places before you actually execute them. And that's open to everybody. Like the public can use VirusTotal. Anybody can without an account too.
Great
Um,
advice. Thank you.
I wanted to, as Laurie was talking, I was also thinking like there are two things you can think about. What you know can scare you, and what you don't know can also scare you. And when somebody does not want to believe or listen, you just have to show them what's on the other side. So I would say if this person is not believing that they're being phished, I would show them what can happen if that they were a victim of phishing, and the once they understand the repercussions on the other side. Usually I start off by showing people telling people all the bad things that could happen. And then now they want to know, what can I do so that I can't prevent this? So I feel like if somebody does not believe, they just probably think that nothing crazy is going to happen to them. So I would say show them what could happen, and then they will feel a little bit more careful.
Great advice from both of you. Thank you so much. I think it's really important that we make sure we're keeping people educated, because then they can have that kind of agency to make those decisions for themselves, as opposed to, having someone else come in and say, oh no, you're being scammed, because that's where they kind of start to think, I don't really know. And so on that topic, can either of you, or I guess both of you, each offer maybe one piece of advice on one thing everyone should know about cybersecurity?
I guess I can start. I think one thing that everybody should know about cybersecurity is that I don't know, this sounds simple, but that it exists, because a lot of people just it never enters their mind that they should ever be conscious about kinds of things. For example, I work a lot in mobile security, and people have this common misconception that if they use a mobile device, they're basically safe from everything. If they only download applications from official app stores like the Google Play Store, the iOS App Store, they think they're always safe. And this is actually incorrect. A lot of malware has been hosted from official sources because no kind of review process is going to be perfect. Everybody's human, everybody's going to make mistakes. Even automated processes can make mistakes, and it happens more often than you would expect. So always be suspicious of the applications that you download, even if they're on your mobile device, on your iPad, on your tablet, anything like that. Try to make sure that you see the reviews of the application. If somebody says, no, this stole all of my data, okay, well, that you probably shouldn't download that application. And try to stick to the more popular known applications. It's mostly the unknown that really puts people in challenging situations.
And do you have
I
anything?
guess I could add, yeah, I was waiting to see. Okay, I guess what I could add is on top of what Laurie said, again, yes, it exists. And also think about the fact that it exists for a reason. Nobody had money or time and then suddenly decided to create cybersecurity. So something happened to someone and then they realized that cybersecurity is necessary. And if it happened to someone, it could also happen to you. So with awareness, continuous learning, I know that we use social media all the time. So learn a little bit about cybersecurity, be nice to your friends and family. If you heard something out there, do something good for them. That's the simplest way you could do something good for someone else, by sharing what you've heard. Obviously, there's gossip, and then there's also like relatable source information. You want to make sure it's from a reliable, reliable source where you're getting your information from, and then share it with people. Start the conversation.
Great. I really love that advice. And Laurie, I'm really glad that you brought up mobile devices, because another question we have is, what are some settings on our phones or laptops that people can use to protect our personal data?
Oh, I have got a really good example for this. There's this one common setting that nobody thinks twice about. This is on mobile devices, particularly looking at Android applications. This is abused so often by malware authors, just all the time. It's called accessibility settings, and these are totally legitimate settings. Like, they're really important settings to be able to help people who might need additional capabilities on their devices. But this is also abused by malware authors to perform actions on your behalf. So this will allow them to click buttons on the screen, parse web pages, and look at what you have entered inside of web pages. So it's a very risky setting at the same time. So this should only be enabled for applications that actually need it. What I see all the time is that in malware applications, for example, banking trojans that try to steal financial information from your device, they will request an accessibility services, and they'll spam these requests like over and over again. And sometimes they'll even like play this alarm on your phone to try to get you to enable these settings. So if that's the case and you have an application that's constantly spamming these requests, trying to get additional permissions, you should probably think twice about giving it those permissions, because it might be doing something kind of bad. Applications should not look that spammy when they're on your phone. So be very, very careful about giving applications accessibility service capabilities.
Okay, great. Thank you. And do you have anything to add about that?
Yeah, I would say your apps updates. I know we hate those. So those are the things that we love, but they're also the things that make us vulnerable. When we don't do those updates, but because maybe you like this one better than the next one, I can relate. But those updates exist for a reason. And threat actors, when they're trying to target you, they are going to feed off of vulnerabilities, and those vulnerabilities, they grow with older version of software for your apps. So even though it might suck, just update the app.
Thank you. So this is a question that I have personally. We've talked a lot about the role of the companies that are in charge of cybersecurity, and like our personal role as educators to help protect users from cybersecurity threats. But I'm wondering if you can elaborate about the role of the user themselves, because Laurie, as you mentioned, it's the user who's clicking the button to download these viruses. And so how can we kind of help the users take their own agency in protecting themselves from cybersecurity threats and malware and things like that? And this is a general question to both.
I guess I can start. I think the primary way that we need to help users on an individual basis, like as an individual myself, the way that I can be helped, the way that everybody can be helped, is via education. Now, once you are in like the workforce every day, you'll go through these trainings that are like, don't do this in security, don't do this, be skeptical of this. But even without those kinds of trainings, I think it's important for everybody on an individual level to be educated in their own way, particularly targeting the platforms that they use most often. What I would really like to see, this is kind of a nice to have, is companies or media sites like TV or something like that, adding little educational snippets about cybersecurity. Instead of maybe having like a 30-second advertisement, they could have a 30-second cybersecurity awareness segment. That would be really nice to have. It doesn't really exist at the moment. So while that doesn't exist, I think it kind of falls to the responsibility of the individual themselves to find news sources that will share cybersecurity information that is more up to date. I like to follow a lot of people online who post the latest vulnerabilities, who post the latest kinds of malware. Additionally, I like to follow a lot of different news sources that describe new kinds of malware as they evolve and as they are released. And this helps me stay up to date with I should be wary of this as an individual user. And I think it would really benefit a lot of people if they wanted to have similar kinds of practices.
Great.
I would say not only learn, but also find your style of learning. Make it fun for you. Myself at work, I read a lot. I talk to people a lot. So in my free time, because I just love learning about new things. I'll listen to a podcast. So find things that are applicable to the way that you like to learn about things. I hope that makes sense. I feel like I said it in a circle, but find your learning style. If you like to read, find a page that will post articles for you weekly. If you like podcasts, then try to find some podcasts you can subscribe to. Go to Laurie's YouTube channel, learn some stuff. Use the resources and find your style.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I think our final question for today is probably going to be, I'm not sure if this was asked previously by Sandra, but can y'all talk about what your experiences were with cybersecurity before you officially got into the field? Like, I guess what's the most surprising thing that you learned, or what led to a major perspective shift after you got professional roles as cybersecurity protectors?
I guess I can start. Oh, that's a lot. I didn't know a lot, I will be honest. It was such a new field to me. I had a background in programming, but that's very, very different from cybersecurity. So the fact that it even existed as a potential career path and as something that everyday people need to be aware of was very surprising to me. So I do reverse engineering now, and just the fact that you can take compiled applications, try to use different tools to decompile them, approximate what the malware developers saw when they were writing these applications was super fascinating to me. It's incredible that you're able to do this, and it's incredible all of the different tools that are available to people to be able to dynamically execute malware safely, to be able to see what it can potentially do to the underlying system and how it can affect the underlying system. It was also an incredible discovery to me that malware can target all kinds of things like mobile. I mentioned earlier, it can target mobile, Windows, Linux, IoT devices. Your smart fridge can get malware on it. So that was just the main thing to me that was amazing when I started like joining this field and seeing what was potentially out there.
For me, one thing I want to include in my answer as well is how my journey sort of started professionally. I'll start there. I knew that I wanted to be in the cybersecurity field, but I also didn't really have experience. I was going to school, I was learning. So guess what? I looked for places that would want my help in maybe I could get a job there. It won't be as competitive. Or I was thinking about the experience and the things that I would have the liberty to explore because they just need it and they don't have somebody who would be able to do it for them. And then I was thinking like I could add this to my resume. So that's great. But also I'm gaining the experience. So I looked for schools nearby. I looked at the library, and I started off in a middle school who actually needed an IT assistant. It was my part-time job as I was going to college in my junior and senior year. And, the pay was not great. However, it was my oyster. So many things were broken. So many processes needed to be fixed. And instead of getting frustrated, overwhelmed, because I really don't know a lot professionally besides like what I've studied, I took it as an opportunity to strengthen my skills. And it worked. By the time I left, processes were implemented. Even with hardware, I was fixing computers, saving them tons of money, printers, whatever. I was even a 3D printing teacher. I was doing it all. I was exploring things. And then that actually allowed me to gain so many skills. And then right after 6 months after I graduated, I got an offer with a big company, and I was able to do that because I took advantage of the resources around me. So your first company does not have to be Microsoft. Until it is Microsoft, find where you're needed. And I promise you, when you get to Microsoft, Google, whatever, wherever, you're going to be so skilled that if you were going to be hired as like, I don't know, an entry level, maybe you're no longer an entry level because you're so experienced. So that's what I would say about my journey in into cybersecurity.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I think both of your stories and your experiences are very interesting and very inspiring. And I personally am interested in computer science and 3D printing as well. And so I was really glad to be able to listen in on your thoughtful responses. So I guess before we close out, do either of you have any last words that you'd like to share with our viewers today?
Yeah, I would say thank you for having me. Thank you for being interested in cybersecurity, because you're opening a path for not only yourself, but for many people who are curious. You know, I had to search very hard for resources when I was trying to get into this field, and I literally had to throw myself in the fire to find out, which definitely straightened me. But you're doing something that is beyond yourself. You're paving the way for people who will be researching, and maybe they'll find this video, maybe they'll connect with you. So showing up, asking questions, and getting involved, not only you're ahead of the game for yourself, but you're also paving the way for other people. And thank you for doing that.
So yeah, also thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk to everybody. I think last thoughts are realize that you have a voice and you are able to educate yourself in all of the areas that you want. There is information available. You do have to dig for it, just like Anne was saying. It's not going to be super obvious to just, here's a step-by-step how to get into cybersecurity. Here's a step-by-step how to be a secure person in general. You have to dig and you have to be able to want to get that kind of knowledge. But if you do have that desire, there is a lot of information that is available for you. So make sure you're kind of taking the accountability to educate yourself and also share anything that you have with your family, with your friends. It's even a nice practice to be able to give yourself that accountability by setting a certain time each week to say, share with your friends. Okay, here's the latest cybersecurity news that you might not be aware of. It's kind of fun too. It's a good experience. Yeah, that's it from me.
Great. Thank you so much to both of you for such a great discussion. And thank you to Sarah as well for moderating it. And thank you thank you to everyone watching. We hope you gained some valuable information. And thank you to the STEM Festival organizers for having such a great week of events. Before everyone leaves, it would be great if you could fill out our post-end survey, which I think Miss Sullivan dropped in the chat. And everyone's going to receive a recording. So thank you all for coming today. It was great to talk to you both. And yeah.